Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Today we are going to look at living versus dead faith. Some people read James chapter 1 verse 17, where James says that faith without works is dead, and they think that he is contradicting what the Apostle Paul wrote when he said that a person is saved by faith and not by works. However, James is not contradicting Paul because they are speaking to two different audiences. Let me explain. Imagine if a doctor said to one patient, make sure not to run for 3 months or put any pressure on your ankles. Then imagine the same doctor said to another patient, make sure to run for the next 3 months. Is he contradicting himself? No, because he's talking to two different patients who need to hear different things. The first person broke his ankle and is told not to run, while the second person is overweight and is told to run to lose weight. Paul is talking to Gentile Christians who didn't come from a religious background. So they were confused on whether they had to adopt the Jewish religion and follow the Mosaic commandments to become a Christian. But James is talking to Jewish Christians who grew up religious with God's commandments. And what happened was that they started to take their faith for granted and didn't feel a need to obey God because they knew they were saved by faith. So Paul is talking to Christians who need assurance of faith, while James is talking to Christians who need to understand true faith. The main point James makes is this: saving faith always works, and a faith without works never saves. James is not contrasting faith with works, but living faith versus dead faith. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? Here's why a faith without works does not save. This type of faith does not help anybody. If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? The word good has the idea of profit. Imagine a person without food or clothing. Instead of doing anything, you just tell that person some nice words and Christian cliches. How does that person benefit from your word? Words don't pay for rent or food, right? And just like the words of an uncaring believer who fails to help a person in need are useless, so is the faith of a person who does not have any work. Look at what James adds. So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Now, James is not saying that works is the way you make your faith come alive. He is saying that a living faith will always produce good works. It is like a heart that doesn't beat or a person who doesn't breathe. Works is not something you add to faith, just like breath isn't something you add to a body. Instead, it is a sign of life. At this point, James will respond to a possible objection people might come up with. The objection goes like this: we know that we are saved by faith. It's good to do good works, but I know that you don't need works to be saved. So I have faith and you have works. My faith will save me, and your works won't save you. But look at how James responds to this objection. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. James gets rid of the false dichotomy between faith and works by asking a question. How can you show your faith apart from works? The word show has the idea of making something visible. Imagine if two different people came up to you and said, I have $1 million I want to give you. What would be your follow-up question? Can you show me your bank account? Imagine if one person showed you their bank account and the other just told you to trust them without showing you anything. Who would you trust? In the same way, how do you know a person truly has faith apart from any good works? You can't. That's James's point. To highlight this point even further, look at what James adds. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Listen, demons knew Jesus was the Son of God, but they never responded with faith, but with fear. In other words, knowing Jesus is not enough. Instead, you only know your faith is alive if it produces good works. So James adds this: do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Here, James is winding up with this knockout punch. He will show us from scripture to prove his argument. He starts by examining Abraham. Abraham was called the father of faith. From Abraham came the nation of Israel. And the Apostle Paul says in the book of Galatians that everyone who has true faith is a son of Abraham. How do people throughout generations know that Abraham truly had faith in God? The same way that God knew that Abraham had faith in Genesis chapter 22. God wanted to see if Abraham would sacrifice his only son, Isaac. God wanted to see if Abraham truly trusted in his promise to provide an offspring, even if he took away his only offspring. Genesis chapter 22 shows us that Abraham was about to kill Isaac, but God stopped him because he saw his faith. So James refers to that episode and says this: was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? Interestingly, Abraham was already justified by faith back in Genesis chapter 15. So why is James saying that Abraham was justified by works in Genesis chapter 22. James doesn't use the word justify the same way the Apostle Paul does. When Paul says justified, he is talking about being declared righteous so that you can have a relationship with God. But when James uses the word justified, he is talking about the idea of a person who is proven to be righteous and is already in a relationship with God. Look at what James writes. You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God and was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. For Abraham, in Genesis chapter 15, he was declared righteous by his faith so that he could enter a relationship with God. But it wasn't until Genesis chapter 22 where he was proven to be righteous by his work and to be in a relationship with God. In other words, Abraham proved that his faith from Genesis 15 was genuine in Genesis 22. The word complete has the idea of reaching its intended goal. Abraham's faith from Genesis 15 came to its intended goal or full expression when he obeyed God in Genesis 22. To drive home his point even more, James introduces Rahab. We see the story of Rahab in Joshua chapter 2. She was a prostitute in Jericho who believed in the God of Israel because of what he did to deliver them from Egypt. So when spies from Israel came into Jericho, Rahab hid them and helped them escape by lowering them on a rope from the roof of her home. But what happened was that Rahab became a symbol throughout Jewish history of a Gentile person who was an enemy of God, who became a friend of God through her faith. Notice what James highlights about Rahab. And in the same way, was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? If Rahab just says she believed in God and didn't act on that faith, then she wouldn't have been saved. She would have never helped the spies. She wouldn't have helped them escape, and they wouldn't have remembered her and spared her life when they conquered Jericho. It wasn't her intellectual knowledge about God that saved her, but her works that saved her in the end. Her works proved her faith, in other words. And now James concludes with the final illustration. For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. Just like you can't separate the spirit from the body, you can't separate works from faith. And do you know when the only time you will ever see a body without a spirit? At a funeral. When you are at a funeral, you are looking at a body that is separated from its spirit or soul. In the same way, do you want to know when you will ever see faith without works? At a spiritual funeral, when that faith is dead. Thank you to today's sponsor, On Reverence. They offer a free digital worship music app called Maskill. If you want to find out more, I'll leave some links below in the description box. If you missed the last video about favoritism, I'll leave a link here for you to watch. Until next time, see you.